Hello, all. I'm Emily Benson, educator and career coach, back with part 2 of my series here. By popular demand in my household, I'm changing the name to The Secret Language of Careers. My original name was The Death of Careers, which I still think we're going to see some aspect of that. So I'm not going to forget about that concept or anything, and that's going to be part of sort of what comes out in these videos, is the ways in which our career structures didn't work for us well before this pandemic, and are probably going to be shifting in some major ways in the coming years, if not sooner. So today I want to talk about this idea of assumptions, underlying assumptions. And I'm seeing a lot on social media about employers' reactions to the pandemic and how they are or aren't taking care of their employees. So, for example, one person I know in one of my groups, she got an email. I'll just give a little bit of the gist of it. But basically, workers who serve remotely will be docked a total of 10 hours of leave time per week. If you do not have available leave time, you'll be docked 10 hours of compensation per week. Remote workers are responsible for accurately recording the 10 hours of leave through the self-service leave. The 10 hours of leave time being used under this remote option represents the time you are unavailable on campus to perform these additional duties. It goes on like that. But anyway, it's very clear from this language that this employer doesn't trust their employees, right? They're making them track their hours religiously. They're talking about docking pay. They're talking about, processing forms and things like that to prove that they're working. So there's this, you can see in the language there that there's an underlying assumption of a lack of trust, a disbelief that employees are going to actually do their job during this time, a disbelief that employees are doing their best, right, to get their work done in this really difficult time. In a much happier note, I've seen a lot of messages that are totally the opposite from employers. Messages of support, messages of trust, messages of confidence. So this is sort of two very, different views, right, on how we view workers, how we view humans. Do we trust people to do the right thing? Do we trust them? Do we treat them like adults in the workplace, or are we going to distrust them and micromanage their every movement and kind of operate on the perspective that people aren't going to do their best unless we force them to in some way? And so we've got these two, very different views of how workers are viewed. And that's what part of this language of careers is all about, right? Is looking at the language of how we think and talk about work and trying to figure out what are the assumptions underlying that. And how are those assumptions changing our language, but then also our actions in ways that serve us well or do us huge disservices. And the language around careers today in general, it just has a lot of deep underlying assumptions that I have been trained to question. I was lucky to study under amazing feminist scholars, so I've been trained to question those assumptions, although of course in my everyday life I forget and talk in ways in which some of my biases and stereotypes come out. But I try to catch myself, and when I am doing the hard work, I'm catching myself. And I think that, now we're in a time where we're all questioning a lot of assumptions, right? That's just the world we've been forced into, and just in the last week, right? Our assumptions of the safety of your job, the assumptions of how your job, how your industry is going to progress, how your career is going to progress, your options for the future. There's all kinds of underlying assumptions being questioned right now. And I think that's actually, as terrible as a time this is, that's actually a really good thing to start questioning that. I have a lot of friends and people that I've connected with who have deep desires to move away from some sort of traditional form of career, but didn't feel that they could because they need the stability and the income and things like that. They crave things like being free. They crave having a much more flexible schedule. They crave to not work 40 hours a week or more, right? I know so many of you work much more than 40 hours a week, but we have this built-in system, right, of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week. You get your salary and your benefits, and it's a very regimented structure that a lot of times we just don't have time to sit and question. And it's so ingrained in us that that's the way we are going to do things. And that's the way the world works, this capitalist economy, right? The danger comes in even at a deeper level when those assumptions, the underlying assumptions that come out in our language are about, who is suited for what kinds of work, right? And that's what I'm going to dig into even further in future videos. The ways in which the language that we use around careers shuts out certain people from particular pathways and keeps us stuck and locked into old patterns that really didn't work that well for very many people, and certainly not for women and minorities. So that's what I want you to keep an eye out in upcoming videos, is really some hard look at the language of careers, the patterns of careers, and how and why the contemporary career structures are holding so many of us back from a lot of potential to live a much more meaningful, fulfilled life. Please send questions my way, things you want me to talk about, dig into a little bit. I have a lot of very practical stuff happening right now too. I know these are a little bit more theoretical discussions going on in these YouTube videos, but if you go to emilybensonphd.com, I have a free workshop posted right there at the top for working on your career, doing some reflection and some networking in these more challenging times. I'd love to have you take advantage of that, and I'll be building some other communities where we spend time really focusing on what are our strengths, what do we truly have to offer, because when we come out the other side of this pandemic, things may look quite different, and the opportunities for using our skills may be changing, and our industries might look quite different. So taking some time to reflect on who we are and what we really have to offer, and using this time also to build relationships through technology, through social media. We just have a lot of opportunity that I want to encourage those of us who are privileged to do so to take advantage of. Okay, so please comment here or head over to my website, emilybensonphd.com. Talk to you soon. Lots of love.